Now then, people, welcome back to episode 2 of Leeds United's top 10 greatest players of all time, as voted for by you, the viewers, and us on the panel, and many, many more. And we're going to be now counting down from 5 to 1. Let me just remind you where we were up to. So we went from 10 to 6. In 10th was John Charles. 9th was Jack Charlton. In 8th, Tony Yeboah, 7th, Peter Lorimer, and Gordon Strachan in 6th. So, lads, we'll jump straight into it then. In 5th position, with 262 appearances and just 3 goals, them 3 goals all coming in cup competitions, away to Partizan Belgrade, home to Spartak Moscow, and at home to Oxford United in the FA Cup. It is the chief, Lucas Radebe, in 5th position. I think a lot of people will have wanted this guy in the list. We still sing about him now on the terraces, don't we? So, Oscar, I seen you nodding along there. Happy to see Big Lucas in the top 5, in the top 10, if you like. Thoughts?
Yeah, I had Lucas high. I think it was that 6th, something like that. I think I had Lucas. Yeah, he absolutely phenomenal. I'm not sure if he is our highest rated centre back on this list, but in terms of what he gave this football club, in terms of the first Leeds team he started playing in wasn't particularly competitive, and he just got better and better and better season on season. And by the time I was watching Leeds, he was established at a top level centre back. We're talking the top 2, top 3 centre back in the league. The fact that Alex Ferguson, how highly he spoke of him. Yes, in the end, it was Rio Ferdinand who left, but I think that's probably more of an age thing. The fact that Rio Ferdinand was younger, had probably more longevity. The fact that Lucas was quite a late bloomer, but Alex Ferguson spoke a lot about Lucas Radebe in the media at that time. He was well up there, with your Tony Adamses, players like that, at that kind of level. That is what we're talking there. And the fact that he could play deeper, higher up the pitch, in holding midfield, could play in goal as well.
I was going to say, in goal.
It was Lucas. He was proper Leeds, proper Leeds. I just, clutch goals as well in Europe, as I kind of mentioned as well. Clutch performances, the 2000-2001 Champions League run, you look at his performances in them games. I think Lee Bowyer as well would have to be in there in terms of individual performances, but Lucas Radebe, the level of forward he was coming up against and the performances he was putting in those games. And it's just a shame. Leeds, I don't think, had Lucas not picked up that big injury in sort of like 2002, 2003, I genuinely don't think we'd have got relegated in 03-04. I think he would have been the difference maker, having that leadership in the team. He just never got a run of games, from sort of 2003 onwards, and it was such a shame. And he started off in a pretty average Leeds team, then played in a team that could have won the Champions League, could have won the Premier League quite easily with a little bit more luck, and then ended up in the Championship at the end of his Leeds career. But it sums up his loyalty to the football club. And again, he's another player that whenever he comes back to Elland Road, you just have to see the sheer love for the man. All ages as well. In terms of, I know we've had a whole range of ages here, but from my age, it's kind of like people in their 40s, people in their 60s, people in their 70s. I'd imagine Lucas, and as it has proven, appears high up in the list. And another player who quite easily could have had an even better career, really, a bit like Tony Yeboah, a little bit unlucky at times in his career that, when he was in South Africa, he wasn't picked up sooner. But listen, I don't think Lucas would change his career for anything.
Yeah, what a centre-back. And I think Oscar's bang on. I think in that era, a lot of the top clubs had that big centre-back, and he was that to us, wasn't he?
Oh, he absolutely was, yeah. An amazing player, amazing centre-back. Didn't make my list, but I couldn't be happier that he's in it. He deserves it. He was brilliant. And yeah, as Oscar said, he was so unlucky not to lift a trophy for Leeds. He should have done. The team was good enough. He should have had winners' medals in his career.
Yeah.
And really unlucky in that Champions League run. He got injured, I think, in the quarterfinals. And we missed him. Like, Matteo came in and he did well alongside Ferdinand, but he's not Radebe. And like Oscar says, you take that influence out.
Him on John Carew in those games, Rocco, in that
exactly.
That different story.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't think Valencia were good enough to get to 2 successive finals. Like, we should have been in that final. It was written and it just went wrong. And if Lucas was there, maybe we would have done. But yeah, and like you say, an amazing ambassador. Nelson Mandela's hero. Like that's the bottom line. Like what more can you say? It's just an unbelievable man.
He should just make the list for that line alone. Nelson Mandela's hero. Like, if anyone has any gripes with him being in the list, which I don't think you will, remember that line that you've just heard and be like, okay, yeah, I hear it. Andrea, I mean, I know he wasn't in your list either, but even still, I think you'd be happy with him being in there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very happy. Actually, you see all the shirts I have behind me. They're the only one really with a name on the back is this one, and he has Radebe 5 at the back. I'm really glad, Joe, you said it. It was an icon not just for the football club but the whole city. Like the unity, bringing the unity again with the national, with the state, of South Africa after the apartheid. But actually, a little later, they won the Africa Cup of Nations, the first competition they took part in because they were banned before because of the apartheid, and Radebe played a huge part there. So that's why he was Nelson Mandela's hero. Yeah, he played in France 1998. He played in South Korea and Japan in 2002. So he was like the leader too. He was not just a Leeds leader, but also South Africa was one of the top players, not just in the Premier League at the time, but in Europe as well. But I recommend Rocco's book about those years, all years, because you can really see by his words how Radebe was highly rated by everyone in Leeds, and the fans loved him. Every time we hear now Carnaval de Paris, the song, everybody says Radebe, the chant. But I'm really happy to see him in the list. Lucas, exactly. I'm really happy to see him in the list, but I'm at the same time sad, because we said that he started in the Premier League, he played in the Champions League, but he ended his career after many injuries in the Championship, and he got that very bad injury, and that was not the way to end his marvelous Leeds career.
Okay, on to fourth position now. We're getting to the juicy bits. I'm excited for the lads to see the reaction to the list, etc. So I'm getting a little bit giddy, but this guy's one of my favourite players. Probably couldn't care less if he's in this list at all. And by saying that, you probably know what I'm talking about. It is, of course, David Batty. 373 appearances, just 4 goals. But yeah, had 2 stints at the football club. Rocco, I think you had him 10th on your list. Obviously, clearly, a lot of Leeds United fans really, really love just David Batty and everything he stands for, hence why he's so high up on the list. But yeah, I'm actually buzzing as high as he is. I know some people might disagree with some legends that have missed out, but yeah, in 4th position, Rocco, David Batty.
Yeah, definitely. I think he deserves it. Like, no mean feat getting him into my list because, you've got to get over players, like some players that have played 500, 600, 700 games and won multiple trophies. But Batty did win the league, similar to Strachan, got those reasons where he helped us get out of the get into the first division, and then win the championship, and then coming back, that pretty much was the main thing for me. Well, not the main thing, but what sort of pushed me into getting him into top 10 was that second stint, because again, he was just magnificent. Like, he was an amazing midfielder, one of the best in the country. He sort of blew me away a bit. I mean, he was in midfield when I started going in 92, 93. So I saw him for a season and a bit there before they sold him. But when he came back, he was 30, but he was such a better player. And it was an absolute joy. And again, like Radebe, if he'd have stayed fit, he was very unlucky with injuries that second time around. And the O'Leary team missed him desperately. They really did. If he'd have stayed fit, I am absolutely convinced we'd have won the league in 2000, and who knows what else. He was absolutely awesome, and in the Champions League run as well. Alongside the core, for him to shine in the Champions League, best midfield. It was like no one could get the better of that midfield. We were just brilliant, and he was. Yeah, he was the cornerstone of that, and again, like just a top bloke, like you say. He's like just Leeds thoroughbred, and I think he deserves to be in there. He's a proper legend of the club.
Oscar, great to see David Batty high up on the list, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only reason I didn't have David Batty in there was because that's the era I grew up on when David Batty coming back, and the fact you had the core and Batty alongside each other. Lee Bowyer, playing a little bit further wide and in different positions, but I had to have put all 3 in if I was putting one in, because I couldn't split them. They were all absolutely crucial in their own way. But David Batty, it was honestly, just such a phenomenal player. And I think his personality, was part of what made him so good. All his energy went into that 90 minutes on a Saturday. It felt like that, and it just came up every single time. In terms of consistency, the fact that he came back in 2 spells. I think he's probably the only player I can think of at Leeds who's come back and been as good a player, if not better a player, at the degree of Rocco. You just don't see that. You don't see it very often in football in general. A player come back and have that same hunger, in a different era as well. The fact he's already won the league title, but to have that same hunger, he got himself into the England team at that point as well, and putting some really strong performances, in sort of like 90, the late 90s, early 2000s, and longevity again. He has to be well up there, and when you're looking at peak, that Champions League, 2000, 2001 kind of era. He's got to be well up there. I think we're into that stage now of the list where you're looking at peaks and saying, at that point, we're the best ever Leeds player. And I think with Lucas and David Batty, you're getting into that territory now where you take that part of their Leeds career when they're at their absolute best, their best seasons. Very difficult to find anything much better than that. And you could make an argument for these kind of players as being top 1, top 2 in the list. I think you're getting to that level now, and David Batty, absolutely 100%.
Andrea, David Batty, he's well up there, and just class.
Yeah,
I'm so happy he's up there.
He was. I'm going as far as saying that he's one of the most underrated English midfielders ever. Absolutely, because he had everything. He had the strength, he had the vision, he had the passing. You couldn't get past him. Now the new generations have already seen probably. And
do you remember Ronaldo?
Ronaldo one, that's one.
The new
what
generation.
I was say. Yeah, exactly. But he had everything. A proper talent back then. And he was rightfully rewarded with the league title. He played even in 2 competitions for England, not just France 1998, but also Euro 1992. Very young English squad. They even had Martin Keown, for example. Still that very old Gary Lineker for in that tournament in Sweden. But winning a league title at Leeds 2 years after getting promoted, then going to Blackburn under Dalglish and winning the Premier League with Blackburn, Shearer, Sutton, Henry, Lesaux, all those players that Blackburn signed, winning the Premier League with Blackburn, then being a good and consistent player again at Newcastle, 3 good sides in the 1890s, going back to your hometown club and being a consistent player back in that side too, returning a different player, because he was still a young player when he left. He returned like a veteran. But he needs to be there, because he was a complete midfielder all around. He was like the OG Calvin Phillips, They were often compared,
exactly.
They were often compared.
Sure.
Let's burn similar positions, similar style of football in certain occasions. Let's remember that he played at Euro 1992 after the league title with Leeds. But then 6 years later, and it wasn't easy to get into the English side. He was a starter again at France 1998. A different player, and then move again to his hometown club, and he was a consistent player there too. Consistent for every club he played for. So, what more can you say about him? Consistent leader, a guarantee. Yeah.
Right, folks, it's time for the juicy bit. It is, of course, the top 3 Leeds United players of all time. In 3rd position, lads, and the most recent player on this list is, of course, Pablo Hernandez. In 3rd position, which is quite some feat. Obviously, like Rocco was saying earlier, he had a Strachan type impact. I never really thought of it like that. Maybe there is a bit of recency bias to it, but let's not forget he is the only ever player to win our Player of the Year award 3 times in a row. So sort of does back up his such high standing within the list. Lads, are you surprised to see Pablo as high? I mean, he did have such a great impact. I mean, Rock, I'll come to you because you mentioned that Strachan link. Maybe in 10 years' time he wouldn't be as high, but 3rd position, I mean, wow. It's quite the position for Pablo.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make a case for him, really. He wasn't in my list, but what an absolute joy he was to watch. He was an incredible player at a time, came at the end of a horrific cycle, possibly the worst cycle we've ever had, I suppose. It has to be, I guess. And Pablo was the light that sort of helped to bring us out of it. Obviously, Bielsa finished the job, but without Pablo, would he have done it? So influential, so much ability. You know, it was absolute magic. Like some of the stuff that he could do. You know, he would have been a worthy member of any Leeds team, you know, in history. So, you know, that from that point of view, you can say that he's definitely like worth being in the conversations. And yeah, I suppose there's some recency bias in there.
Yeah.
I love Pablo, absolutely brilliant player. And that's my one gripe with Bielsa is that he didn't give him more chance in that Premier League season. But yeah, definitely a legend of the club as well, which, you know, it's hard to be a legend at Leeds because there are so many legends, you know, that have achieved so much. But Pablo definitely is one.
Yeah, and Oscar, you spoke about players on this list being at their time, at their peak, the best player in that team. And Pablo definitely was that, right? Of that group of players that we had.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're doing it pound for pound in terms of Pablo compared to the rest of the team, he probably is, you know, pound for pound, the best in terms of how much better he was and how much he carried that Leeds team. Rocco alluded to it. The season we actually went up, you know, in the end, it was quite comfortable, but there was a lot of games, particularly after COVID, you know, when we came back behind closed doors, Pablo didn't start a lot of them games. He came on, you know, on 45 minutes, often for Tyler Roberts in that kind of run of games. And I always remember the Fulham one when we won 3-0. We were pretty poor in the first half of that game and looking, you know, a little bit nervy. And then Pablo comes on, he puts in two of the most unbelievable assists. The whole performance just carried the team, and it's just gutting that he didn't do it in front of a full Elland Road and away. You know, imagine if away fans had been in that Swansea game. You know, there'd been 20,000 Leeds fans in the Liberty Stadium that day. And it just sums it up really. And you know, in terms of pound for pound, and you can only perform, you know, at the level you're at. You know, in terms of with the players you're alongside. You know, there's no doubt. You know, as Rocco said, Pablo wouldn't have looked out of place in any Leeds team because his mentality, his technical quality, you know, it was all there. And you have to remember the Pablo that played for Leeds was in his mid-30s. The Pablo, you know, that played for Valencia, you know, and got into this, you know, the great Spain national team, possibly the best international side of all time. You know, he's had caps for them. That's how good a player we're talking about. Pablo was the difference maker that got us promoted. You know, obviously Bielsa played an enormous part, but in that final 8 or 9 games when we needed the big moments, Swansea away, you know, the Fulham game already alluded to, Pablo came on and saved the day so many times that season. For me, if you talk about best ever free signings the football club's made, you know, Pablo, I think he'd have to be, for pure impact, he'd have to be number one.
Yeah, he epitomises the Bielsa era in effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Technical leader, I think probably the most talented and technical gifted player we had in the recent years, in the championship, especially the championship years. Also,
he was a cheat code. He was a cheat code.
Absolutely.
The way Bielsa used him was perfect. And
also, if you look at his whole career, Joe, honestly, at his whole career, Valencia, Swansea in the Premier League, Spanish national team, can we say he's probably in the top 3 also of the players who play in the championship? I think also he can be the best player who ever played in the championship if you look at the impact he had at his age.
Yeah. Okay, in second position, folks, with 561 appearances and just 69 goals, which is quite surprising, is our very own Eddie Gray, who makes it in second, which I think, if we're being honest, you probably all know number one's going to be. I think for me personally, in second, it makes sense to have Eddie Gray there. He's just ingrained within the football club. I mean, we've got young Archie and Harry coming through soon as well, so it's great to see him up there. Andrea, I'll come to you first. Eddie Gray, happy to see him as high up on the list as he is.
Yeah, honestly, because Eddie Gray is Leeds United. You know, he was the talent in that review squad. Unfortunately, he was constantly mobbed by injuries. He never got up to his full potential because of injuries, but he was ahead of the curve, you know. He was like a player from those days, the current era, you know, in terms of dribbling ability, in terms of tricks also, in terms of how he tried to get past defenders, you know, and his vision for goal and his passion for shots outside the box. It was ahead of his era. It was probably the best dribbler we ever had. Probably the most natural talent we had in terms of his football ability. Ravi said that he didn't leave footprints on snow if they play on snow. Yeah, it was called the last words because he looked like he danced on the football pitch. And yeah, apart from the contribution on terms of technique, there's plenty of goals you can watch. Probably the best ones are the ones against Burnley, you know.
Yes.
That one, that lob from outside the box, almost the half center circle is still mental, you know. So he was a proper Fußballgott, they say in Germany, you know, a god of football, you know, in terms of football genius and football in mind. But the Greys are Leeds United. Eddie was the star.
I'll come to you. Eddie Gray has to. I mean, he had to be in the list, of course, and it's great to see him up so high and in second place.
Well, yeah, you say that, but controversially, I didn't have him in.
Did you not have him in your list at all?
No,
Wow.
no, I didn't. The reason I didn't was obviously because of the injuries, you know. So he missed, like, you know, through Leeds' peak years, he missed so many games. You know, he just couldn't do a full season, which, you know, it's heartbreaking, really, because, you know, for him, of course. But for the team, you know, what would they have won if Eddie Gray was fit week in, week out? You know, they would have won at least double what they did. You know, there's no doubt about it. 1970 FA Cup final against Chelsea, you know, just unbelievable. You know, if you watch that game on YouTube, it's a joy to watch. And, you know, it's a horrific pitch. You know, the ball doesn't barely even bounce. But Eddie Gray, you know, imagine him now on a perfect pitch, because that was nothing to him. He could still do it, you know, like a Brazilian, you know, with the ball at his feet. Just absolutely amazing player. I'm always filled with regret because, you know, I always think what could have been. But I also feel very guilty that he's not in the list because,
I can only echo the lad's thoughts. I think he is the most naturally gifted player to ever wear a Leeds shirt, without doubt, really. You know, in terms of what he can do on a football pitch, left foot, right foot. As Rocco said, you know, you saw some of the tackles that went in on him at that point. You think, you know, I think most teams would have been down to 10 men, you know, in today's day, and they would have had to defend in a very different way, and Eddie would have just thrived even more. You know, he's the type of player that it'd been the envy of, you know, certainly in today's, you know, era, with all the money that gets spent, easy 100 million, 150 million pounds worth of talent there, you know, in today's era. And he was, you know, you see what opposition man just said about him, you know, how much praise, you know, and even opposition fans, you just tell he was the manager's dream. And if only, you know, he hadn't had those injury problems, and who knows, you know, had he played in this era where it's better sports science, etc., you know, we probably would have seen, you know, and more rotation, you know, more bench options, substitutes, you know, bigger squads. You know, I really do think, you know, he was so unlucky that he achieved so much, but he could have achieved so much more. Easily could have been number one, and still you could easily make a case for him being number one. And if Archie Gray achieves even 20% of what Eddie does, then he will also go on to be a Leeds United legend. And it just feels like, you know, it has been 60 years where the Gray family in some form has been involved in this football club.
Okay, folks, position one now, the greatest Leeds player of all time, as voted for by you, and I think you can all guess at this stage who it's going to be. You don't get a statue outside the ground for nothing. It is, of course, Billy Bremner. 772 appearances for Leeds, 115 goals. He only ever made one substitute appearance for Leeds and is our highest appearance maker as captain on 490 appearances whilst wearing the armband. The greatest ever captain in our history, and deservedly sits top of the list. Would you agree, Rocco?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, see, I think he's the only one that we all agreed. Oh, no, we didn't actually. You didn't have him first, did you?
I had Charles. Sorry. But yeah, Bremner second. I know, I'm going to get hammered for that. Thanks for digging me out.
I think Matteo's been robbed, personally. I personally think he's been robbed here. I personally think he's a GOAT, but, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, but no, like Bremner, obviously, you know, he led that great team. Mentality-wise, for the starters, you know, so I've read all their autobiographies of all the players in the team, and they all talk about Bremner and his influence, and, you know, never knowing anyone else in the game. Don Revie had never known anyone else to have an influence on a team like Bremner, you know, the best captain he'd ever seen, other people said that as well, that he played with Scotland. He was just something else, some burning desire inside him that, he got the best out of himself, of course, but he got the best out of everybody around him. An unbelievable legend. Tenacity in midfield, but then the flair as well. When I watch videos of him, I'm thinking he's like Gascoigne. You think he's a hard tackling midfielder, he's the dynamo and all that, and he is. But his skill is unbelievable. The way he can dribble with the ball, the goals that he scored on the big occasion. 3 winning goals in FA Cup semi-finals, goals in both European Cup semi-finals, other semi-finals as well, finals, scored at Wembley against Liverpool in '65. Like, the list goes on. Didn't score that many, but the big occasion he rose to every time. Just incredible. And the last thing I would say as well, so like there's signature moves in football down the years, like the Cruyff turn. The reverse pass should be called the Bremner pass, because like he did it more than anyone else. Like, I'm not sure that he's the first to do it, but he was the best at it. Like, I'm saying that categorically. He was just awesome. I love watching the guy play. I wish I'd have been able to see him live, of course. Don't get better than that as a player for Leeds United. He just embodies everything that we love to see.
Yeah, for sure. Side before self every time, as the saying goes. And Andrea, I mean, to be honest, in terms of the list, he was streets ahead. Like, in terms of the numbers, the list, he was just far and away the number one winner, really. It wasn't even close. Maybe a couple of positions with the others, but yeah, I mean, deservedly so, the greatest player of all time in Leeds United's history.
Yeah, that's why you have a such as an Elland Road, like you said. If you look at that great Leeds side, everybody associated him first and foremost with Don Revie, the manager, and Billy Bremner as the captain. So absolutely, Bremner. He had a similar trajectory to all the other players there, but he got better season after season, and like Rocco pointed out, it was a proper dynamo. Could be a hard tackler, but also a dribbler, in terms of forward runs, central cuts, in terms of ball carrying too. But apart from that, let's remember that he was not the highest in terms of weight. It was not the strongest in that team, but he was always the leader of those men. And you clearly saw that, he's in all the games and in his attitude, in his professionalism, the way he was connected with the club, and especially Revie.
Oscar, I mean, what more is there to add, really? It's all been said, hasn't it? But
exactly. First thing I said when we
win.
jumped on this stream was, I take it Billy Bremner's number one. I think it was just so obvious. It had to be Billy Bremner. It was always going to be, comfortably. I mean, he was the best ball winner in the country. He was the best passer of the ball in the country, and had the best footballing brain in the country. He's probably the most clutch player in the country. So it was an obvious one, absolutely. The big moments, and I mean, I think Andrea touched on, in terms of the back end of when things dropped off a little bit for Leeds. It was definitely a big one for Brian Clough, the fact that Billy Bremner picked up a big suspension. In fact, on Brian Clough's first game, he gets sent off for getting into a bit of a boxing match with Kevin Keegan, but there we go. But that was part of his legend. What made him the player he was, and Bremner and Giles. I think, to be honest, Johnny Giles is super lucky not to be in the top 10. But Bremner and Giles, in terms of when you talk about all-time midfield combinations, even you go into this era, throughout English football, Bremner and Giles will comfortably always be in the conversation of the best. And there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, Oscar, had he not been number one, I know he wasn't in my number one, but I knew he was going to be number one. Had he have not been number one, I'd have demanded a recount, mate. Do you know what I mean? It'd have been, don't worry, this video wouldn't have seen the light of day. I felt a bit dodgy having like the likes of Pablo and Co that high up. So had he not been number one,
spreadsheets, mate. I still want to see these spreadsheets. I am convinced Scott Wootton is up there.
We had some wild takes, but deservedly so. Billy Bremner sits top of the tree. Just to round off them, folks. So in 10th was John Charles. In 9th, Jack Charlton 8th, Tony Yeboah 7th, Peter Lorimer in 6th, Gordon Strachan. 5 was Lucas Radebe, 4 was David Batty, 3 was Pablo Hernandez, 2 was Eddie Gray, and 1 was Billy Bremner. How do we feel about the overall list, lads? I know there's a few that you mentioned Giles, Andrea mentioned Viduka maybe missing out. I think Gary Speeds, I feel that he maybe could have made it. I mean, these were nearly men anyway, so they were close to.
Gary McAllister as well. I think multiple cases. I think Andrea mentioned Gary Kelly as well. It was such a difficult list to do because you've got so much longevity, and you've got people like Tony Yeboah, where their peak was just so ridiculously high. There's a lot of players like that. But I think in general it's a really strong list. And when you look at it in context, I know the Pablo one in 3 will get probably the most things in the comments. But in the context of,
but they voted for it. They voted for it, Oscar.
Exactly.
So have a go at yourself. Have a go at yourself.
I think it's a very, very fair list. Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely.
I'd like to give a shout out for Paul Madeley as well. 700 odd appearances, and just being able to cover for all the players. All these world class players, played in all the finals, played in every game pretty much, unless he was injured. When we had a fully fit squad, he was playing right back, and Rini was on the bench. So this was a top class player, and he wore 8 different numbers in 7 finals over 5 years. So he was playing in a different position every final, and we won 6 of them. That shows that he was good enough to play in all different positions at the very top level. So he deserves a mention, at least. Unlucky, obviously, like other players, not to be in there.
Big Norm as well, of course. I think for me, I'd say Norman was probably our best centre-back personally. But again, you can't Lucas and Jack Charlton. It was very close. Between the 3.
Yeah, definitely. Right, folks. Well, that's the end of the video. Leeds United's top 10 greatest Leeds United players of all time. Please remember that you voted. It wasn't just us, okay? Because I know what the comments will be like, but it is what it is. We've stuck our head above the parapet. We wanted to do this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Who missed out? Which order should it have gone in? We'll look forward to reading them all. Something for the future. Me and Andrea were chatting. We might do top 10 Leeds worst players of all time, which I think would be very good. That would be an even more exciting watch, I think. Many names could go in there. But listen, it's been a pleasure being able to put together this. It's been a pleasure spending the evening with these lads as well. We spent, nearly 2.5 hours together, to be honest. So it's been good. And I'd like to thank you all for coming on and giving up so much time as well. It's been a pleasure doing this with you. I think we'll leave it there. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in a bit. Thank you.
Bye-bye.